Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to Wigmore Hall and a very warm welcome to people joining us online across the UK and around the world today. What a distinguished platform we have, and another distinguished group who will be singing for us later on. Benjamin Luxon died on Friday the 26th of July, surrounded by his family at his idyllic home in Massachusetts. Born in Redruth in Cornwall on the 24th of March 1937, he became one of the most distinguished baritones of the 20th century. Astonishingly versatile, he was at home in a multiplicity of musical genres, whether singing roles like Wozzeck, Falstaff, Onegin, Don Giovanni, stirring the last night of the Proms audience with his Rule Britannia, offering gloriously sensitive interpretations of German and English art songs, or performing parlour ballads on Channel 4's Top C's and Tiaras, or the BBC's The Good Old Days. There's wonderful performances of him in the good old days on YouTube if you want to go down that wonderful rabbit hole. Time and time again, he brought to the stage or concert platform exquisite characterizations delivered with flawless musical integrity. Benjamin Luxon grew up in Camborne, a town that had grown rich on tin and copper. He sang first as a treble. After national service and a short stint as a PE teacher, he was accepted by Guildhall School of Music in London, where his rare and phenomenal talent was quickly noticed. But perhaps he learnt more on the job. As he recalled, if training did come, it was rather late in life and a little bit sketchy. In the early 1960s, he joined Benjamin Britten's English opera group, where he sang roles including Cid in Albert Herring, Tarquinius in The Rape of Lucretia, and Demetrius in A Midsummer Night's Dream. At Covent Garden, he helped create Peter Maxwell Davies's opera Taverner, other roles at the Royal Opera English, and Diomede in Walton's Troilus and Cressida. He was also a regular at English National Opera and at Glyndebourne, where appearances included Ulysses alongside Janet Baker, and Peter Hall's Marriage of Figaro with Kiri Takanawa as the Countess and Ileana Kotribash as Susanna. He was to make over 100 recordings, a rich range including Monteverdi, Brahms, Schubert, Quilter, Bernstein, even an album of Don McLean covers. His oratorio recordings included Sir Alexander Gibson's account of Gerontius, Leonard Slatkin's The Kingdom, and Robert Shaw's recording of Britain's War Requiem. He recorded Belshazzar's Feast twice, once with André Previn and once with George Schulte. Luxon was made a Bard of the Cornish Gorseth in 1974. In 1986, he was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire for his services to music, and in 1991 made a Freeman of the City of London. He held an honorary doctorate in music at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland and at the universities of Exeter and Kent. After a period of worrying issues with his hearing, he suffered a catastrophic onset of deafness in 1990, which brought about the end of his singing career. As Barry Millington's obituary in The Guardian noted, in due course he came to terms with his hearing loss, describing his subsequent life as being very rich. In 2000, he moved to the Berkshires in Massachusetts and with renewed vigor started performing in the spoken word. He took on such roles as King Lear and performed Stravinsky's Soldier's Tale. He also narrated Tennyson's Enoch Arden with Richard Strauss's piano setting, including special occasions when he had the joy of being accompanied by his teenage grandson, Josh Luxon Robinson. We'll hear Josh on this platform later. In 2012, he formed the Sandusfield Players in his Massachusetts hometown, a group of amateur actors who performed numerous plays over the years. A high point for Ben was bringing the company home to Cornwall to perform Our Town by Thornton Wilder at the famous Minack Theatre on the cliffs near Land's End. He was a key advocate in the building of Hall for Cornwall, Truro award-winning theatre and concert venue. He's survived by his wife, Susie Crowfoot, and his children, Rachel, Dan, Jonathan, and Emily, and many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Benjamin Luxon's extraordinary talent, work ethic, vital energy, musical virtuosity, and versatility has, without doubt, left an indelible mark on the profession and delighted and moved millions of music lovers. We celebrate his life and we remember him today. Now, would you please welcome Sir Mark Elder.
Everyone, good afternoon. I'm sure we're all brought together here in this wonderfully famous hall through the memories that we all have, either of listeners or of friends and colleagues. And those memories will be presumably tinged with such regret that Ben is no longer with us. And as Petroc has said, he gave so much. There are two strains, if you like, that are in my mind so often as I think about him and remember him and what a wonderful friend he was. This tinnitus that overtook him gradually was at a time when he was performing with me and the company at the Colosseum. And I remember we'd done this production of Falstaff a couple of years before, and he said that he would do another one. He'd do another series of performances. And it was quite clear that it was already difficult for him. But I shall never, ever forget his spirit and his determination not to be overcome by this considerable difficulty. And he said to me, he said, you know, you might have just to watch me occasionally if I'm not quite on the right note. And we did these performances with him struggling to hear, struggling to know that he was on the right note. Now, some of you will remember Falstaff has very little slow music in it. It's just fast all the time. And I shall never forget this performance when he acted so well, but he didn't know where he was orally. So he would try and start a phrase, and I'd go, and then I said, all right, keep it, that's it. No, down. And he needed reassurance. His eyes never left me, and I was at the same time trying to coordinate this amazingly brilliant piece. But what was so wonderful about it is that he wasn't sort of broken down by it. He was determined that this character should live as it had done a few years ago. And I thought that was so terrific. And I imagine, of course, some of the audience felt a little uncomfortable and some weren't aware. But he found it so difficult. And we did it together. It was a strange sort of duet, trying to get the notes right. He didn't have it easily in his ears anymore. Some years later, and I was conducting at the Tanglewood Festival, near where he and Susie were living, they came to my rehearsal, and they sat there in the third row. And later on, when we joined up again, and it was wonderful to see him again, he said, I couldn't hear a note, he said. I couldn't hear anything, but I just wanted to come and see the atmosphere, and to see everybody's concentration, and see how you were getting on. It was wonderful, he said. And the next day, we had breakfast together quietly, and he just communicated through lip sync, lip reading, you know. And it was very touching for me. It was very wonderful that his spirit seemed to be so surviving and so determined. The other strain, if you like, of my memory of Ben is completely different. Years before, when he was in his prime, and my wife and I went down to Dorset to spend a weekend with some relatives who we adored. And my uncle said, there's somebody doing a recital in the Pitt Rivers Hall. And I think this cottage where we were was on the Pitt Rivers estate. And I said, oh, right, can you remember who it is? And he said, no, I'll check up. It's not a name I knew. So eventually he told me it was Ben. And I said, get the seats. That would be absolutely wonderful. I'd love to. It was in a barn in the middle of the Dorset countryside, a barn that had been beautifully repaired and made smart, as it were. A lot of people there. What I shall never forget is, I think, the essence of what Ben did. His first half was German lieder, Schumann, Schubert, I think, perhaps even a bit of Wolf. And after the interval, he sang everything in his own tongue. All the second half was Finzi, Gurney, Warlock, whatever, I can't remember. I just remember the tears coming down my cheeks. I think about it often. There was something about the way he communicated. There was nothing wrong with the first half. But this second half, he was a different being because he knew he was speaking to people who understood every syllable. And I think that was crucial in his art. The colour of his voice seemed so close to the colour of the note. It was as if the speech was just being sustained by melody. And I just so wish that all young singers would get inspiration from that fact, that he managed to align himself by using the melody to speaking the poetry. And his voice had such beauty, didn't it? Such incredible individual beauty. So there are two things that I remember about him: the difficulty that he suffered and his courage, but his wonderful, wonderful communicative power.
Stands about a woodland ride, wearing a white for Eastertide. And take from 70 springs a score, it only leaves me 50 more. And since to look at things in bloom, 50 springs are little room about the woodlands. I will go to see the cherry hung with snow.
When I was 21, which follows on from that. And that was about the time, I think, not far after that I first met Ben. I think none of us that are speaking about him here this morning have collaborated So you're going to hear the same stories and memories, feelings and attitudes over and over again. But it bears hearing in his case, I think, because he was very special, and you'll enjoy that relish of our memories of him. Like a lot of people, I suspect, I went just a few days ago, to the iPad or computer, whatever that damn thing's called, to look at Google or Wikipedia or something like that. Anyhow, I put in Luxon, baritone, and obviously they'd read X and baritone, and the first thing that came up was the baritone saxophone. And I thought, well, how silly. But I thought, I had nothing to do. I'm retired. I thought I'll just read about that. And what I... Not before time, perhaps. And I read the baritone saxophone is a member of the saxophone family. Lower pitched than the better-known tenor sax, and higher pitched than the bass sax. Commonly used in concert bands, chamber music, big bands, jazz combos, a versatile instrument. And I thought, well, how singularly appropriate. That's Ben. He was at home, just as at home in folk music as he was in opera, on the stages of the world's concert halls, or in Leeds' good old days. And I have a feeling that he chose to kick against the traditional course of performance that's expected of us, not wanting to be ever pigeonholed. And in so doing, performing his parlour songs with Bob, mischievous Bob, and with every bit as much care and attention that he gave to his German leader and to English song and all the more legitimate fare. He was simply happy to be a singer, engaged in singing, and probably as surprised as I was that such a thing was possible as a career. I met him first at Aldeburgh. I took over from him in the role of King Arthur in Purcell's great music theatre. He made a powerful impression on me. Damn him. At Glyndebourne, he was always winning at tennis, or he was always swimming further lengths than anyone else. It was sickening, he was so physical. But his joy of life and his physical presence were apparent from the very start. There was no side to him, no pretense, just the genuine article. With those qualities, he was a natural for Billy Budd, and ironically, it was a role that eluded him. Later on, I found myself alongside him at Glyndebourne. I took over in one season in '77 from the role of Forrester that he'd first performed there a year before, and in '77 he was then Don Giovanni, and I watched and tried to learn and gain something from him before I took over myself. It was a step up the ladder for me, and it was meat and drink to Ben, quite clearly in Peter Hall's production. Before that, I'd watched and admired his Ulysses, alongside Janet, if I may, and his Count Almaviva, a model performance, bearing in mind he was up against it. Kirita Kanawa, Ileana Kotrubas, Federica von Stade. That's not an easy stage to inhabit when you've got those people alongside you. But somehow he managed to bring a warm, Italianate Cornishness to his work. Cornwall was always there, and rightly so. He was a life force, and a great humanity were present in every task that he undertook. George Walker, a friend from student days, up in the northeast with his wife Roz, were very, very close to Ben. It was a wonderful, warm friendship and association they had. And they put together a Geordie last night of the proms that went on for several years at the Newcastle City Hall. Not a great venue, but it was what we had at the time, and it was fine. And peopled with artists like Ben, it took on a greater significance. I met them quite by chance one morning on the station following one of these concerts at Newcastle. I'd been there for something else, can't remember what, visiting family, I suspect. And we just happened to get into conversation. Over a number of years, those evenings of last nights of the prom, or last nights of the proms, raised thousands for cancer research. Sadly, ironically, both George and Ben succumbed to that dreadful disease. I became involved for a short time in those concerts following that chance meeting. But as a Northern Easterner, as I was, I never enjoyed that favoritism, that popularity that Ben did. He was hugely popular there as he was in Truro and in Redruth, I firmly believe. Today, it seems to me, so many singers pursue a narrow attitude towards their performance, using their blinkered vision to achieve their goal, the road to perfection. There's no such thing, actually. Ben knew that. And how much better might it be to take a leaf from his book, look around, smell the flowers, croon to a guitar, play a set of tennis, have a swim, look at life and enjoy it. That's the Ben I remember, and we thank him for that and all of his music.
I wanted you to hear that song simply because it was the first song of Schubert that Ben, who incidentally was quite a pianist, it was the very first song that he taught himself. It was also the first song that we both did together, and that was way back in September 1961. I can just about remember it. We were at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, and the leader class, the first leader class of the term, Ben, I happened to be at the piano there. There were 30 other singers. Anyway, Ben walks up at some point and hands me this one page of Schubert, 18 bars. I didn't know it. Fortunately, it wasn't too complicated. But so I started off. As he came in, but within seconds, I think, I realized I was hearing something very special in this voice. As you were saying, he immediately struck by this natural sort of sense of communication. I don't know what it was. I mean, it was in German, it wasn't in English. But even so, you stood up, you sat up. And I think also, by the time we'd finished, I realized that this was a voice, I was going to say a voice in a million, you know what I mean? It was so wonderful. Anyway, that was that, went home, told my wife, I thought I'd heard something. Next day I went up there, Ben came to me and he said, oh, meaning to meet you. We hadn't actually hardly said hello in the class. And he bounded up and said, do you fancy working on more Schubert? Well, I could hardly believe it, really. More Schubert? Of course. And we literally said, well, when can we start? That, of course, that moment changed my life. It was, of course, the beginning of many years working with him. And not only the work, but the developing friendship we became obviously very close. And not only myself and he, but with our families, my growing family, 3 daughters, and his Dan and Rachel. And I used to spend hours going up to his home in his farm up in Junction 6 of the M1. We would explore, of course, repertoire, whatever. But let me just take you back for a moment to the Guildhall. He graduated. The Guildhall gave him a gold medal. And also sitting at the back of the hall on that occasion was Mrs. Emmy Tillett, who very cleverly, I think, the Guildhall had decided to invite. And the message came back to us after we'd played, Mrs. Tillett would like to see you back in Wigmore Street. Tomorrow, if possible. So anyway, we went. Ben went in. Came out after 3 minutes, I think, saying to me with a great grin on his face, she's promised she could possibly get me into Glyndebourne. I went in, and she said, Mr. Willison, I think I can help you. And that was it. Thank you very much. Well, she did. Our first recital was at South Hampstead Girls' School. And I remember we came away with a sum of money that you couldn't even pay the congestion charge now with. Ben was very decent. He split it 50-50, I have to say. Well, we gradually worked our way around a few music clubs, and I think the odd festival. I haven't kept great records of that particular, those 2 or 3 years, but it seemed as though it was on. Of course, Ben was obviously in opera, oratorio occasionally, so these concerts would come after, a month or 2 or 3 with a gap between. Anyway, what did happen in 1966, if you're still with me, Martin Dalby. Now, he was a composer, a Scottish composer. He was also working on the third programme. Have I got that right? Third programme in those days? Yes. Third programme as a producer of music programmes. He'd heard Ben somewhere singing, and he was determined that he was going to give Ben a recital. So he told Ben this, and the normal way of things in those days, I don't know whether it's still the case, but the normal thing was that the BBC had a team of pianists, 6 or so, that should a singer, instrumentalist, need a pianist, there was somebody there that they would offer. Well, apparently, I didn't know this, by the way, was going on. He didn't tell me about the first broadcast. But Ben apparently said, look, I've been working with this DW chap for some time. Anyway, he made a strong case, apparently, that he should, and he wanted to, only play with myself. Well, that created a problem, certainly for the producer. What did they do? What happened? Well, it was that they hatched a plot between them to circumvent this BBC ruling. So the plan was that Ben would show me some songs by Martin Dalby, no less, that he'd written a few weeks beforehand, which had been passed for broadcasting. Composers had to be vetted, by the way, as much as instrumentalists had to be vetted before they were allowed to play. Well, the idea was then, Ben said to me one day, I've come across these, I rather like them. Might come in handy. Yes, okay. Why don't we learn them? Let's learn them. So we did. After, I suppose, 3 weeks, he said to me, I've just told the composer we've learnt these. Martin said, well, any chance of hearing you play them? Yeah, said Ben, I'll sort it. So he said to me, how about if Martin comes down to your house? We were living in Croydon, and we go through them. He'd love to hear them. Yes. Down he comes, down they come. We play through. And at the end of it, I remember Martin sort of sitting on the settee just there. He just sort of casually said in conversation, by the way, David, I'd better let you know you've just passed your BBC audition. Well, Ben, really, I don't know who else would have done that for anybody, as it were, but it was, of course, a turning point. Obviously, I was qualified to play on the BBC, and so that meant we could both do it together. But I always look back and think how generous he was to really, because he was up against it with Martin and the BBC, but he stuck at it. He didn't give in. I'll do it my way was his motto, I think, in many ways, nicely, always with a touch of humour, never aggressive, So we had this recital up in Wednesbury in the Midlands, and it was a live one. We did half of it, but that was it. After that, one or two other producers in the third program suddenly got wind of this man with his wonderful voice, and I can only describe. I think I've actually kept the contracts from the Beeb from that very period, and there are, I don't know, something like, within the first 6 months, I think there are 30 contracts for performing one way or another, which, looking back, I think is quite amazing. But every producer loved his voice. In the following, I think about 35 years, Ben and I, of course, toured around. We went into Europe, we went to America, and so on and so forth. We went to Japan, and the usual haunts for this kind of thing. We recorded during that period, of course, I think I counted up, he recorded over 400 individual songs with piano with me, and apart from Andres, and I think Julius also played on a disc for literature. But apart from that, he was an absolute perfectionist without making a thing of it. And I certainly admired this work ethic. The other thing, I mean, it's already been mentioned that he was athletic. Did you know he represented Cornwall at table tennis? He was, if he saw the sea, or if we often went family-wise together with him down to Cornwall or Aldborough, I remember, but certainly in Cornwall, he got the smell of the sea. There's nothing would stop him. Whether there was a 20-yard high cliff into the sea, he'd dive off it. He was an extraordinary strong swimmer. Anyway, his stamina, in other words, was astonishing. He could sing for what seemed like hours on end. He never half-pedaled either. It was always, the proper voice. And I can remember after rehearsing like that, whether at my place or his, he'd go out into in his place, of course he had 5 acres of ground, and he would, he'd say, I'm just going to chop the latest delivery of logs. We've got to keep the log store stocked. And he'd be out there for an hour, chopping away, great big adze. Things like that. He came down to I remember, he came soon after we'd moved, and we had a garden in Croydon. It was somewhat overgrown. What does he do? He's more interested, I think at that point, when he saw the garden, of actually clearing it for us than he was probably in doing any rehearsing, but neither be that may. So Ben would go outside, literally chop a tree down, and cut the wood up for the winter. And that was him. Physically, he was like that all his life. Tremendous athlete, because he was training prior to singing to become a sports coach, teacher. That was where he was off to. And it was that, I haven't got time to go into how he came to singing, but that's where I met him at Guildhall. Finally, I should say that, it was a privilege. I was proud to play with him and to have supported, as I did, to share all that wonderful life of music that we had between us. Thank you.
you sounding now? Is it the call I'm seeking? You'll know the call, said the trumpet at all, when my trumpet goes a-speaking. I'm rousing 'em up, I'm waking 'em up. The tents are astir in the valley, and there's no more sleep with the sun's first peep, for I'm sounding the old Riv Valley. Trumpeter, what are you sounding now? Is it the call I'm seeking? Can't mistake the call, said the trumpet at all, when my trumpet goes a-speaking. I'm urging 'em on, they're scampering on, there's a drumming of hoofs like fun, there's a maddening shout as the sabres flash out, for I'm sounding the charge, no wonder. Trumpets but faintly speaking. I'm calling 'em home. Come home, come home. Tread light, all the dead in the valley, who are lying around, face down to the ground, and they can't hear me sound the rally. But they'll hear it again in a grand refrain, when Gabriel songs the last rally. But they'll hear it again in that grand refrain, when Gabriel songs the last rally.
As is appropriate, I am going to do a brief tweet about Ben and Glyndebourne. Dear Ben, he really was a shining star of the 1970s at Glyndebourne, singing no less than 120 performances of 7 different roles with us in that decade alone. He was really a treasured member of the Glyndebourne family, and the spirit of that family was something which gave such a really special warmth to all we did during that great period. Ben was down to earth, totally unpretentious, a modest Cornishman who somehow managed to inhabit, in an extraordinary, magical way, every role he undertook. I know I'm echoing many of the words that have been spoken already by others this morning. His Glyndebourne debut was, in fact, with the touring company in 1971. So Emmy didn't actually get him in 1964, after all. His Glyndebourne debut was with the title role in Eugene Onegin. Luxury casting indeed for the touring company. But then we often had luxury casting. But then for the festival the following year, he sang for the first time, 1972, the production and performance that is etched in the memories of all of us who were witness to it. Il ritorno d'Ulisse in Patria, Ben with Janet Baker, breaking our hearts, unforgettable magic, the greatest thing that music and theatre, to which we are all devoted, can possibly achieve. And so, the following year, he took on The Count, with Iliana, with Flicker, with Kiri, and Knut Skram, and I saw a picture earlier with Marius Rinsler and Nucci Kondo and Bernie Dickerson was up on the screen behind me. That glorious Peter Hall production of Figaro. After a year off from Glyndebourne in 1974, he returned as the Forester in Vixen. Then in quick succession, Ford in Falstaff, Don Giovanni, and Papageno, in a whirlwind of activity which never seemed to exhaust him. His stamina has already been referred to. It was extraordinary. And he regularly took on not just one, but two roles during a season, simultaneously. Oh, the joy of youth indeed. His final Glyndebourne performance was the Zauberflitter Prom in August 1980, the end of a decade-long extraordinary journey in Sussex. He was a much-loved colleague in an era that was full of remarkable people, Glyndebourne. A very great British singer, but also a modest, unassuming international star. And it was typical of Ben, with his big heart, that he came all the way to Chicago in 2009 for the Chicago premiere of Owen Wingrave, written for him by Benjamin Britten, to be there for the cast and the conductor of that production in Chicago, Stuart Bedford, his old mate from Aldborough days. Ben was a dear, wonderful man. He was indeed greatly loved. And now I have the privilege and pleasure of handing over to Ben's dear colleague on so many occasions, Janet Baker.
A long, long time ago, a group of singers was waiting in Aldborough for Ben to start rehearsing an opera. We were also waiting to welcome a newcomer to the cast of Principals. And in the rehearsal, it was an early in the operation, and many people were walking about the stage, putting on chalk on the floor, doing the things that happen as a production is going to start. And it was quite lively and busy, and there were quite a lot of people around. And somebody came up to the group of people of which I was a member, and looking a bit like probably a sailor. I thought it was a sailor at first, but he looked like a farmer. And it was a very robust-looking person with a red face, and he looked so healthy and strong, and began to speak to us. It was an extraordinary experience because his point was to describe to us what he thought the singing profession was like. And he was wanting to impress upon us that no way was he going to take part in what he thought the opera world was like. And he explained to us where he came from. He told us about himself, that he was a West Country man with a strong accent, which probably he never quite lost. And he wasn't going to have anything to do with the ridiculous things that he'd heard about being an opera singer. He was going to be himself. We had to accept him exactly as he looked, exactly as he presented himself. And of course, this morning you've heard that marvelously honest and beautiful description of his life and his personality remained to the end of his life. He was full of life, full of fun. To hear his struggles against the hearing problem goes to show that on the other side of him there was another person, very, very courageous, and in the leader world, which was a very, very important part of his repertoire, had this sort of other seriousness that perhaps one didn't immediately accept from him, but made, as we've heard this morning, such wonderful memories of beautiful music in what I think is perhaps the most challenging thing we have to do, a full recital. He visited England a lot during his retirement, and sometimes we met, sometimes we had telephone calls, but you know, we've all had the experience of having a group of very special friends. It doesn't matter how well you see them or how often you see them, whatever it is, even if it's a long space in between, you feel as though you had the pleasure of their company the day before. What I want to say about him very briefly is his influence on opera and acting. I think we're all born natural actors. We all contain within us the same emotions that we share and which the actors of opera demonstrate so dramatically on stage. It's part of the magic. And the acting part that I experienced in this country, in Aldeburgh and in Glyndebourne, were very, very dear to me. I've had many wonderful colleagues, some of whom are in this room this morning. And I've never, ever been disappointed or shadowed in any way by a feeling of not enjoying the company of my colleagues. It's one of the things I've missed terribly in being retired, not working with the people that I've loved so much. But there's another level of opera work. It's very, very rare. You're used to seeing a partner that you know well as a person coming towards you on the stage. They are pretending, as we all pretend, and as actors and singers are very good at doing this. And at the level at which I've been privileged to work, it's always worked. sometimes a person stops being a pretender and comes towards you in a different sort of reality. And in those moments, which are indescribable, you are privileged to join in something which is a very, very precious thing because it's so rare. And of course, Ben was one of these people. I've got a letter from him, one of the last ones he wrote. And he was describing to me how he felt about the work we'd done together, which moved me very much because it gave me the freedom to be able to tell him that I felt exactly the same way about his work with me. And it's reminding me, as I'm standing here today, of the privilege and honor it has always been to have him as a colleague and a friend. And I'm so grateful to Susie for inviting me here today.
What you want? You! What you want from me? Me! What you feel? You! In the forest of my dreams, you have always been the tiger. Give me your lips, and in my eyes see the first element, which is your eyes. No! Give me your lips, then let me rise to my first sepulchre, which is your eyes. Oh, never! Give me your lips, then let me rest on in oblivion, which is your breast. Oh! Give me! Would you have given? How could I give to Cornish, since I have given to Martinus, in whom I am holy, with whom I am only, and without whom I am lonely? Yet the linnet in your eyes lives with desire, and the cherries on your lips are wet with wanting. Can you deny your blood's done? Yes, I deny. Denies your young blood's eyes, and denies refusal, and denial of your lips their lies. Oh, you lie, you lie. Can you refuse your blood's desire? Yes, I refuse, I refuse, I refuse, I deny, look, Fisher, I deny, look, Fisher, I deny, your blood denies, your blood denies, look, Fisher. Too late! Is a step the time has gone, and to calm my angry blood, which coursing to the ocean of your eyes, ages for the quietness of your eyes.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank Matthew Rose for the invitation to come here. I'm sure Matthew and I are Ben Luxon's biggest fans, and we would sit here all day listening to his recordings. Let me give you a little brief history of how I met Ben. It was on the tractor in North Wales. The farmer next door was an amateur bass baritone who'd given up his singing career because he ran 6 farms very successfully. But he gave me 4 tapes, cassette tapes, to put in the tractor. Brilliant speakers. I could drive this tractor everywhere on the farm. The first tape, Sir Geraint Evans, of course. The second tape, this wonderful person to my right here, Thomas Allen. The third tape was a Swedish baritone called Håkan Hogegard. And then the last, but not least, was Ben Luxon. Then in 1987, I met him at the Guildhall, but I briefly met him in 1982. A Welsh male voice choir went to Penzance to do a concert, and we were to join the Penzance male voice choir. 2 of the basses ran up to me and said, "Tonight, Bryn, you are going to have a baritone from the Royal Opera House listening to you." And I said, "Well, who is that?" "It's going to be Ben Luxon, of course." I stood in silence. And I was thinking all through the concerts, what am I going to say to this man that I've listened in the tractor for many, many years? Of course, the moment came where he came to say hello, and he had enjoyed the concert. In the twinkling of an eye, I did not ask one question. And I thought, am I going to get that opportunity? Yes, at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. I had an audition, and I did see that gold medal board where Ben and Sir Geraint were on that board, and it was something for a young bass baritone to strive for. Having met Ben in '87, somehow, maybe that gold dust that he had, I won the 1988 Kathleen Ferry Memorial Scholarship. Thank you for giving that to me, Dame Janet. And in 1989, I did rather well in the Cardiff Singer of the World. And suffice to say that Ben left, as you already mentioned, quite a musical mark on me. What happened in the Guildhall? Well, Ben came to work with the students, not any specific students, everybody that wanted to come to that recital hall and work with Ben. First day, the bass baritones, the basses, and the baritones, of course, all came to sing to Ben. Second day, of course, the sopranos and the tenors had heard how good Ben was. And he was quite good looking, and always presented him with fantastic clothes and suits. It was amazing. And to our annoyance, really, because all the basses and baritones wanted to spend more time with Ben and collect all these pearls of wisdom that he had. And for a young singer to hear about the opera world, to hear about agents, to hear about the pitfalls, to hear about how hard you should work and be dedicated was something that we had never heard before. So the first day I sang for Ben, I had Love is a Babel, because I was going to sing in the Kathleen Ferrier Memorial Scholarship, and Love is a Babel was one of Kathleen Ferrier's famous songs written by Sir Hubert Parry. Ben didn't really react well to that song. And he said, "Do you have something else?" So either it was very good or it was really bad. And my second choice, whenever you went to do auditions in these operatic worlds, I had a formula. I would always sing Non più andrai first, and then Hans Sachs's monologue, the Flieder monologue, so that they could hear quiet singing and singing in German. Well, I sang for Ben the Infinite Shining Heavens from the Songs of Travel. And that's when Ben quietly and gently dissected my performance. And this is something that I genuinely thank him, because he asked me, delve more, Bryn, into the poetry. Learn more about the poets. Please, I implore you, Start using more colors within the palette that you had. And you just heard Mr. Luxon sing the wonderful Butterworth song, Loveliest of Trees. Those first 3 notes are the finest that I have ever heard. And he then, of course, told me I should start sharpening up my image. Dame Sarah Walker, the previous year, had asked me to cut my hair as a student to look more presentable. But Ben said, grow your hair. So I thought Ben was right, in a way. And last but not least, please, Bryn, please, show all of the strengths that you have in your own voice. Don't copy everybody else. Try and work it out yourself. And you heard that beautiful mezza di voce that he had, which is this combination of the chest voice and the head voice. And I'm so happy that for 10 minutes at the end of that session, he worked on that with me, to sing piano. Renato Scotto famously said in a masterclass in New York, Bryn, there is no forte without a piano. And I said to her, yes, I know, because Ben Luxon has already said that to me. So therefore, from the aspect of a student, he cajoled us. He had wonderful anecdotes. He was gentle. He was kind. He was impactful. He was very impressive. And that mark that we talk about, of course, has to have that lasting effect as a student. You have to listen to people as a youngster. And I certainly did listen to Ben. And of course, our commitment, we met each other then in Boston, in Tanglewood, in New York, and he would always have something to say. Bryn, you should sing Wolfram. Make sure that's in the beginning of your kit. Yes, tick. Bryn, make sure you sing Falstaff at a young age. Thank you, Ben. Tick, I did. Bryn, make sure you sing Wozzeck. I failed. But Ben, I'll try and get it towards the end of my career. Thank you very much.
My young love said to me, my mother won't mind, and my father won't slight you for your lack of kind. And she stepped away from me, and this she did say, it will not be long, love, till our wedding day. She stepped away from me, and she went through the fair, and fondly I watched her move here and move there. And then she went homeward with one star awake, as the swan in the evening moves over the lake. Last night she came to me, she came softly in, so softly she came that her feet made no din, and she laid her hand on me, and this she did say,
I thought they were all going off. On the 1st of June, 1966, Benjamin Luxon had his first performance with David Willison here at the Wigmore. At exactly the same time, my mother was giving birth to me. My mother was furious, and it has taken this long for them to invite me onto this stage. And they put me in the corner. Around 4 or so years ago, when we were all let out of our respective cupboards after COVID, Dad, Susie, Erica, and their friends Jim and Jane ventured to see the Boston Symphony. Now, Dad hadn't arranged to meet anyone. That was never his way. But after the performance, he was recognized and ushered like a returning king into the effusively welcoming embrace of Sir Antonio Pappano and a veritable legion of international artists. I felt like Lazarus returning from the dead, he would say when recounting the evening. Dad was always somewhat astounded that anyone remembered him. I mean, this wasn't humility. He knew he was good, great even, but that wasn't really something to be dwelt on. That was then, and he existed firmly and resolutely in the now. And what an extraordinary now the last hour or so has been. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine a time I would be standing here and I might say, "Help, I am besieged by knights of the realm." But I do need help. I need your help to thank not only Dame Janet, Dame Sarah, Sir Mark, Sir Tom, Sir Bryn, Sir John, and any other honoraries that may be lurking in the auditorium, but also to thank everyone who has spoken, who has sung, who has been part of organizing and attending this extraordinary celebration of my father. And specifically, I have to thank the Wigmore Hall for supporting this 200% and allowing it to happen. I have to thank Martin Campbell-White and Askenas Hart. But towering over all of this is the not so diminutive figure of Matthew Rose. This was his brainchild, his energy, his vision to get us all here together. Thank you, Matthew. So Dad would have been astonished and not a little bewildered that not only is he remembered, but that he is remembered with such love, such respect, and such passion by so many. He would have been tickled pink. And from whatever empyrean perch he is now sitting on, and I imagine this to be some gnarled heavenly stump of wood by the celestial vegetable patch that he has been ceaselessly weeding for the last 8 hours, he will be wondering why we all haven't got better things to do. Dad's love affair with language never abated. What made him such a moving and versatile performer, as we've heard, was his ability to communicate stories. This didn't stop when his hearing failed him. In fact, in many ways, that tragedy propelled him to find new outlets upon which he could unleash his astounding talents. His work with the Sandersfield Players, his wonderful poetry readings, orchestral narrations, his relentless work to maintain his and Susie's beautiful home. Dad was an astounding man, a booming presence that not only filled concert halls and opera houses around the world, but also the hearts of all those he ever met. He was an extraordinary musician and performer, yes, but more than that was his inhuman energy and application to any task, combined with the relentless pursuit of what the Cornish might call a proper job, gave him the ability to extract every ounce of talent from everyone he ever worked with. And perhaps most profoundly, following the abrupt end to a meteoric career, was his ability to focus in on his family. To all of us here in the UK, his family in the US, Emily in Germany, and as he got older, increasingly an uncompromising love for and dedication to his grandchildren. 14 of them in total, with a number of other great-grandchildren hanging around. All young and talented, and he fretted over each and every one. And all of them have been left with a big Grandpa Ben-sized hole in their lives. Now, we heard from my amazing nephew Josh playing earlier. Wasn't he good? Oh, yes. Now, Dad was working with him on the list as well as other things, literally until the day he died. Now, what I want to leave you with now is a poem written by my eldest lad, Ben. He sadly can't be here today. He's in New Zealand. He'd love to have read it himself. But I think this poem, written shortly after the death of his grandfather, says it all. Glimpse of a Cornishman by Benjamin Luxon, Jr. People, like jewels, have facets. Edges shine, blemishes catch and carve their picture on the matter of our minds. I hold several such images, different from yours. I never knew the singer, the youth, the talent. I knew the white beard, the booming presence that stole chips from my plate and told such stories. My child eyes saw the glisten, slid past the shadow stuff, captured innocence. I will always have that. Later, I met a man who demurred on the many talents of his hands as amateur, who taught me tennis and tools and the value of a job well done, wood split, weeds plucked, a path laid in stone, perfect with imperfections. Susie takes her place, a spring-like complement to his summer. She didn't see him hand me the chainsaw or the sickle or the axe, this city boy out in the woods, bleeding and free, made proud by my Herculean labors. I met another man of stubborn, inevitable passion, who debated and frustrated over poetry and politics, music and art, who at the age of 80 found his mind and life bright. A student, even at the things he'd long since mastered. And now I was looking. I found a man dressed as a chicken that never lost the innocence I'd first seen as a boy, the passionate joy I recognized as a man, or the inexorable will we could all do with more of. I hear him still. The timbre of his voice. See the wide grin under rugby-bent nose, the blue eyes over snow-white beard, the shape of the shadow of his Cornish America. And I know these moments, these lessons he imparted, are not the last.
upward and the downward slope. I have endured and done in days before. I have longed for and bid farewell to hope. And I have lived and
summer night when stars in heaven were shining bright, far away from the footlights' glare, into that sweet and scented air of a quaint old Cornish town. Borne from afar on a gentle breeze, joining the murmur of summer seas, distant tones of an old world dance, played by the village band perchance on the